Mara. Once again, the goddess of the river came to me in the dream and said, "The king is coming this way. Tell him about the tank. He will listen." Headman, don't tell me that again. You and your dream. I feel tempted to kick you. What is very clear is that Mara has a dream and he's so keen to tell it to the headman, not only headman, probably to everybody, but first and foremost to the headman because he can get it done. And then his keenness is so much, it might have been repeated several times, which is never been believed by the headman. So, what did the goddess tell him? What was her wish? When the king comes, it should be seen that the tank is made, and this he really wanted to forward it to the headman. But headman is not ready to believe his dream. Mara, what have I said to offend you so much, sir? Are you jealous that the goddess comes to me rather than to you in dream? Shall I repeat the very words she uttered? Every word of Mara clearly tells how pure he is at his heart. Simple human tendencies. Maybe the headman is feeling jealous that the goddess has not come in his dream, but in the dream of this layman, this lunatic. So is that you are feeling jealous of? Shall I tell you, I clearly remember every word uttered by the goddess. Shall I repeat it? He is stressing on this, emphasizing on these words of the goddess. Headman, no, be off. And like a good fellow, keep to your backyard till the king departs. I will give you a fine gift. If you have behave yourself, see all kinds of tricks that the headman has used. He has been angry on him. He wanted to kick him. He wants to confine him. In spite of it, his disobedience, no, he feels that this is not working. I have to use some other trick. So he tries to pacify him with the good words, with the polite words. Please listen to me, keep up the honor of this village and me. You please go away. I am going to give you some nice gift which you are going to enjoy. Really, you will feel happy. This at least this may work. This is what is the thought of the headman, Mara. And the person has already given me the greatest gift any man could give. Shall I say who that person is? That means he's not been lured. Mara is not lured by the words of the headman who is ready to gift him something. Mara is already contented before anything. What is that has made him so happy and is contented with what is that gift that has made him feel so? So he says that, and the person has already given. Oh, who's the great man? My father-in-law. The workman laughs at this joke. Just imagine, if at all it is the father-in-law who has given him some gift, what would the father-in-law give his daughter in marriage to Mara? So for him, his wife is the greatest gift of his life. Nothing else counts to him apart from his wife. See the romantic part of Mara's character. Got it. So then, do you think he is lunatic? Absolutely not. He is as normal as anybody else. He can feel and sense these subtle emotions. And then, if that is the case, can anybody call him an abnormal person? An abnormal person? No chance at all. And then, shouting in anger, "Stop laughing, everyone! I will starve you all without work if I catch you again laughing at this fellow's mad prattle. Shut up. Come here, Bhima. Throw down your crowbar. I have another piece of work for you. Come here." So now headman came to a conclusion. It is of no use. This man is not going to obey. He has to be punished. He has to be confined. This is what ultimately he took the decision. Bhima, yes, master, I have come. What is your command? Bind this fellow's hand and foot and throw him into the cellar behind the old temple and keep him there till the day after tomorrow. Do you understand? This was a strict order of the headman. There is no point in convincing Mara. This foolish fellow will continue to speak the same thing. And so his prattle is enough. So now it is better to keep him away. And because nobody is taking his words seriously, nobody is believing in his dreams. So Bhima is one of the very small character, a very short character, but still plays a very major role in this drama. And then, yes, master, Mara, have a look at this giant. He can swing an elephant by its tail. So have a care. If you try any tricks on him, he will crush you between his thumb and forefinger. Poor children. See what are the threats that Mara has to listen from the headman. Bhima, who was one of the road repairer, was exactly like his name. He was well-built person and could very easily hold Mara by his neck because he was so huge, and that is the reason why headman threatens him. If you try to be loggerhead before him, he is going to thrash you. That is what he is doing. He is going to crush you between his thumb and the forefinger, it seems. So that is what he is trying to threaten him. So see, and see the exaggeration of the strength of Bhima. He can swing the elephant by its tail. It is like hyperbole. Nobody can swing an elephant by its tail. It's impossible, or it is just an imagination. That's all. One person with that strength, but practically it is not possible. But he is exaggerating so that let Mara have the threat of this man. Mara, and now, instead of feeling scared about Bhima and also the orders given by the headman to Bhima, he is having a very cool conversation with Bhima also. Hey, how did you manage to grow so fat? Not fat actually, it is sturdy. Fat is a different thing. It's a very sturdy body. I don't want to be like you. But what is the secret behind your sturdy body? Stone-like body, steel body? That is what he is asking. Bhima was very happy. He was praised both by the headman, and now he is receiving an additional praise from Mara also. So he is now very keen to reply to these appraisals of himself. My mother gave me iron decoction when I was a baby, and at every dawn I run up the hill with a large grindstone on my back. It is a very big stone. You can't move it even an inch. Now the secrets of his steel body is revealed by Bhima. Iron decoction. We have heard of coffee decoction. Yes, children. Iron decoction is a no untruth statement. Even when we were young, we were given iron decoction. Definitely it is prepared. It is one of the Ayurvedic preparation that people do at home, especially when one suffers with a severe acidity or something like that. They take an iron bowl, heat water into it, they squeeze a little lemon immediately and pour it and a little bit of sugar or any Swedish thing they want to add it up, and they drink it, which is very good because early time the concept of iron tablet was not there. So this was one of the tactics of having an iron decoction. It really works so wonderful. Your acidity comes down. Really, it is very useful and the best Ayurvedic medicine. So probably this iron decoction, even people make, they actually boil gold in the boiling water. They put the gold and give it to the post-delivered lady, which probably improves the immunity and also strengthens her. That is why it is to be believed. There is the concept of iron decoction. So that has made him so strong. Not only that, added to the iron decoction given by his mother, he also takes up regular exercise of running on the cliff onto the small hill, not just by himself, but by holding the big log of stone, which has helped him to grow his muscles and be like that. Bhima is very much apt to his name. He was very strong, and so Now, oh, here, don't answer his question. Don't allow him to talk to you. Hey, here, don't answer his question. Headman becomes very angry. You don't be so interested in answering these stupid fellows and questions. You do your job. You take him, drag him to the confinement, and then, oh, why not? I too would like to grow fat and strong. If taking a iron decoction and carrying grindstone uphill could make me strong, why should I not try it? Maybe you will not think me mad then because I'm very fragile. I'm very lanky. You're underestimating me and you're not taking me seriously. One day, see, even I will grow my muscles. I also become very stiff and sturdy. Probably then onwards, you will start respecting me. See this thought process of Mara, his logic and his rational thinking, all this really very much tells us that he is truly wise. Though he looks like a simpleton, but he is truly a wise man. And then grindstone uphill, grindstone means, you know, what we call it, ವರಳುಕಲ್ಲು ಬೆನ್ನಿ ಕಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ನಾನು ಗುಡ್ಡ ಹತ್ತೀನಿ, ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ನನ್ನ ಮಾಂಸಖಂಡಗಳು ಎಷ್ಟು ಗಟ್ಟಿಯಾಗಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಭೀಮ ಹೇಳಿದ್ದನ್ನು ಕೇಳಿ ನಾನು ಹಾಗೆ ಆಗಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋ ಆಸೆನ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಪಡಿಸ್ತಾನೆ ಮಾರ. And then Edmund, Bhima says, you can't take the decoction now. Your mother should have put it into you before you were 10 days old. Bhima doesn't want anybody else to be like him, probably. That's another human tendency. See how R.K. Narayan has this observation. That is impossible now because I have done all these things when I was too young, during my formative stage, when I was growing. Now you're all grown up. Maybe it may not affect as much as it has affected me. This expression is added up by Bhima to Mara's words, statement. So now, Bhima, you don't talk to him. Don't you see he is your prisoner? Please remember what is the job I have assigned you. As a prisoner taking confinement. Don't waste your time answering his stupid questions. And then Bhima, yes, I'll be careful hereafter. But who will do my work here? Even when I am teaching this drama in the classroom situation also, I stop here to tell you that this is what the Indian mentality is here, typical Indian mentality. That is what R.K. Narayan's speciality. When you have been assigned one particular job, you do not want to do another thing. So the concession is already been sought now by Bhima. Yeah, today you have given me the job of taking him to the cellar, confining him. Then should I come back and do my part of the job also? That means it will be too much of a work for him, which he is not ready to do that. That is the reason. While sometimes it happens, a teacher is or a lecturer is sent outside to attend some official work. Once he comes back, most of the times we won't be in the mood to take up the class because we have already done one work. This is the typical human mentality of the employees that's been so well brought in. I really think twice about these sentences. I really like them. And then Headman, okay, don't concern yourself with it, means don't think of your work here. This will be taken care. You take him away from this place. You will get your wages all the same, your salary, your wages all the same, perhaps a quarter more because of taking away this disturbance, this troubling ailment from here. I'll pay you more, but please get rid of him, get rid of Mara. That is my request to you. If you do this bit of work well, now take him away and sit over him till the evening of the day. After tomorrow, take him away, drag him like an animal if he resists. So it has been to the brim, probably the irritation has come to the brim of the Headman. if he doesn't obey you, doesn't follow you, drag him like you would drag an animal. This is what has been the instruction given by the headman. In the whole of this scene, we find the workers busy working, the headman giving them constant instructions. And in his instruction, he also reveals that the king is supposed to cross by this village, so the roads has to be made, and there's very less time. But at the same time, he finds that all the workers are disturbed due to Mara. Mara is none other than a lunatic person. He is not lunatic. People have considered him as a lunatic person. He is been brought before the headman. They have a long conversation. At any point, Mara is not ready to accept that he's been disturbing. Rather, he asserts his right of being a citizen of that village and a civilian who has all the rights to move in the public road. And then at the same time, he's also very keen about telling his dream, revealing his dream to the king, because his dream carried a very significant message. That is what he really wants to do. But who would take his word seriously? The headman is absolutely not bothered about what his dreams are. He is not even ready to speck of importance to his dream. And on the contrary, he wants to confine him. This is the end of this scene. We'll move on to the next scene, scene 2. What is that we have here? Scene 2, trumpet blowing, restrained cheering of crowds, etc., announces the arrival of the king. And suddenly there is a confusion as the king is about to pass under a tree. Someone jumps down from its branches, a medley of voices crying, "Where did he jump from? Who is he? Hold him!" Very clearly, this introduction of the second scene tells us that the king has already arrived according to the schedule. He was about to cross by the same village. So naturally, because he is the lord of that place, a grand celebration is set up. People have thronged on both the sides of the road to welcome him, cheer him. After all, he is their king, and they are more than happy because they hardly get a chance to see the king live and so closely. So this was a golden opportunity for them to, because they have heard a lot, but they never have seen him, nor they would have a possibility of seeing him. So that's the reason they're all thronged on both sides of the roads, cheering him up and all those things. But in no time, when the king was about to cross, when there were so many trees shading the whole path, suddenly there is a thud sound, and it was none other than Mara jumping from the branch of one of the trees right in front of the king. And this leads to a little bit of chaos among the crowd. Oh, who is that who is stopping? Because they are so apprehensive. They don't know why this man has come here. Is there any danger to the king, or what for is he coming? Because it's not the normal way. The road has to be very clear when the king is passing by. But this is not the case here. So everybody were for a minute very much troubled, and then now perturbed for a moment, and now what happens? King could feel it, but after all, he's a king. And then he says, "Silence, who is this man?" Answering voice, "Your gracious majesty, this man..." Yes, okay, we will hear the man himself speak. Answering voice, "Your majesty, he is unworthy of your majesty's notice." As the local people knew that Mara was not as normal as anybody else, and to some extent they considered him a lunatic, they were dead scared that he may create a scene before the king. He may speak some stupid things which will definitely be not good to the prestige of that village, to the good name of the village. So that's why it is not an honor to the people also there. So they were so much worried, but no. The king was above all these trivial apprehensions. He really was very patient and wanted to really listen to what that man wants to say. Like probably our Honorable Prime Minister Modi, who gives utmost importance even to the layman and wants to know his opinion about everything. Probably even this king wanted to know what is there in the mind of this man. And then, so your majesty is unworthy, worthy, unworthy, not fit for, unworthy. And then we will hear the man, we will hear the man himself speak. Let him be brought forward. The man is dragged before the king. Who are you? Where did you come from? He was a bit, very much found it strange. This man, he could have stood there. Why all the way he's jumped from the branch? Even if he had some appeal, he could have come before him from the crowd. But why this very unexpected, strange method of jumping from the branch? See the way Mara addresses the king. We feel like thinking twice about the personality of Mara here. Your gracious majesty, I am an unworthy dog, but I have a word to convey to your gracious ears. And after I have uttered it, I shall gladly allow myself to be trampled under the feet of the mighty elephant which bears your royal person. Very clear in his expression. Gracious Majesty, my Lord, I am an unworthy dog. He has labeled himself before anybody could tell him. But definitely, I want to convey, I want to tell you, your gracious ears, see, even because he's a royal king. So he said, your gracious ears, I want to put some news to you. And after I have uttered it, once I tell you, convey you everything, I don't want to live anymore. It's done. My purpose is fulfilled. You can trample me. Got it under the feet of the elephant of your palace. There are two words I want to tell you here: trample and stamp. Stamp at the ಬರೀತಿರೋದು trample. ಅದನ್ನು ಹೊಸಕ್ಕೆ ಹಾಕೋದು, ಹೊಸಕೋದಕ್ಕೆ trample. Stamp ಅಂದರೆ ಸುಮ್ಮನೆ ಕಾಲಿಡೋದು, ಮೇಲೆ ಕಾಲಿಡೋದು. It is not stamping, it's he wanted to be trampled. So you can trample me under the feet of the elephant. This is what his opinion was. Where were you all the time? In the tree. This understood. It's no joke for a person to stay on the top of the branch for a longer hour because it has taken enough time. And the people have gathered here from long hours back, waiting for the arrival of the king. And he was wondered if he could sit there for so long. So what was Mara's reply for this? Yes, your majesty. I was there since the cock crew this morning. I knew the royal passage lay here. I was cocksure you will go by this way. So I hid myself since early in the morning. I have been here. From the dawn, I have been here waiting for you. Waiting in a tree. You could have asked for an audience. You could have requested me to meet me. You could have taken an appointment, asked for an audience space. You could have sought an appointment to see me. If you really had something so significant to tell me, why should you take all this trouble of sitting on the branch? These few sentences of the king very clearly tells that this king was very much concerned about his subjects, his people, very kind-hearted, very patient to listen to the plea of the people. This makes it very clear. And that this man doesn't stop there. He's got a golden opportunity. So he wants to say to the king, what is his, how is he treated? What is his fate in that village? They stoned me at sight and I commanded me to take myself out of the village. When I still appeared, they bound and threw me in a cellar. But the man who was my jailer, though a giant in appearance, has the soul of a baby. He let me go when he heard of my dream and the command of the goddess. And I slipped out unseen and climbed this tree and hid myself in these leaves. waiting and praying for your majesty's gracious arrival. So without, what do you call now, uncut, he says everything, the mentality of his people. Actually, when I want to say something, nobody pays attention, nobody cares for me, nobody gives any importance or respect to me. So they stone at site, stones here. It is a homonym. Stone is both a noun as well as a verb. You can use it as a stone, stoned, stony, and to stone. So stone, stone, stone. It's used in all the five verb forms. So stone is can be used. Probably these are something very new that you have come across. You have to bear this in mind and throw the stone. You need not say they stoned at my side. All the time we have the habit of saying threw the stone. He threw the stone. He stoned. Pelted the stone. That's the meaning of it. And so he wanted to say that they took me away, they kept me, confined me, but Bhima, though his body is huge, his heart is very soft. It melted away when I told him my dream and he let me go. Otherwise, I would not be able to come and see you. This kind of an the backdrop story he narrates it to the king, and then the king, what do you want? Yeah, but still, the king takes the patience. He really is very keen and eager to know what is it that this man wants to tell me. What do you want? Now, listen to me, Most High. See the respect he knows, how the different person has to be addressed differently. He is a king, and how should I speak to him? How should I address him? He has a very clear idea. And then, now listen to me, Most High, where your majesty now stands as a sacred spot. There once stood the great Hanuman on the day Lakshmana was wounded in the battlefield at Lanka and lay in a deadly faint. Guided by immense Hanuman came here, and then he went up the mountain in whose shadow your majesty is resting. There on its crest he found Sanjeevani. He flew back to Lanka with it, and at its breath, Yama's messenger fled, and Lakshmana rose to his feet with a new life. Rise to one's feet. That is the phrase there. Rose to his feet, rose to her feet, rose to their feet, rose to one's feet. This is the usage there. That means to get back, to stand up, come back to normalcy. That is rise to one's feet. And then such was the power of Sanjeevani, and where it grew, there arose a stream which came down the mountain and now flows past your majesty's feet. It is called the Veda. Its water is the very life blood of your majesty's humble subject. Oh, after listening to this dream of Mara, definitely there was enough significance. There was some importance in his words. So what is he trying to narrate here? He wants to say that this kingdom of Rukumangata is a very pious place where Hanuman visited to carry Sanjeevani to Lakshmana when he was wounded in Lanka, almost on the deathbed. And this is the place, the blessed place from where the river Veda flows, originates. River Veda originates. So that's the reason it flows past your majesty's feet. It is this way Veda, that is the river, the Veda. It's the Veda because it's the name of the river. It is this the Veda which has made the whole kingdom so prosperous and fertile. The land is fertile because of her flow. So now what is the point? Veda doesn't want to get lost in the forest, in the land. Rather, what is the next command of the goddess. That is what is to be listened to. Do the water flow on all the months of the year? This was very interesting. Actually, because it's a stream that flows from the originates from this Sanjeevani Mount, the mountain where the Hanuman collected the Sanjeevani. So, is it a perennial source or is it restricted only to some months, especially the monsoons, whenever there is the downfall of the rain? Is it that the king was very serious about it and he asks it? So now Maharaj takes much more interest in replying to the king's query. Your Majesty, I am coming to it. The water has flowed on since the day Hanuman took the Sanjeevani. Its birth is in the fleeting mist of the mountain tops, and it dances its way through rare flowers and forests which clothe the mountainside before it comes down to our village. And what do we do? My lord, here I will repeat the command of the goddess. I saw her in a vision as I lay in my hut. I have never seen her before. She stood before me, her tresses flying in the wind. There were stars in her coronet, or ruby as big as eyes that elephant sparkled on her forehead for a red mark. Her garment was of gold woven with lightning. A look at her, and I know it was the mother. I fell at her feet, and she said, the river Veda, which you see at the foot of the hill and from which you drink water, is my very own plaything. It carries in its bosom the nectar which revives gods and nourishes mortals. But when the summer sun bakes your soil, I keep my pet sheltered in the cool shades of the mountain, and then you die of drought. When summer ends and you have water again, you take what you want and allow the precious stream to dissipate and perish in the foul marshes far off. I command you, tell your king to build a tank and not let a Veda leave this village. Give her a home. These were the words of the goddess.